I never thought I'd find myself in this situation 2 a.m., and here I am sitting in my car outside a familiar bar on the outskirts of Phoenix trying to swallow this bitter truth like it's black coffee. Life throws curveballs, but this was way beyond anything I could have imagined. It all started 3 months back when my brother Brad moved back to town after his construction business in Flagstaff went belly up. My wife Ashley suggested we let him crash at our place till he got back on his feet. I agreed. He was my brother after all. Looking back, I wish I'd paid more attention to how eager she was about the whole thing. Maybe that was the first sign of what was coming. The first sign was so subtle I almost missed it. I came home early one day and found them laughing and joking in the kitchen. Seemed harmless enough, right? Except Ashley suddenly clammed up and scurried off the moment I walked in like a teenager caught doing something she shouldn't. Brad just smirked, that lopsided grin of his, that twists your gut, but your brain tells you you're just being paranoid. I remember wondering if I was imagining things. Then there was the phone thing. Ashley started taking her phone everywhere, even into the bathroom. She'd always shield the screen when she was texting, and I noticed she switched to using her fingerprint instead of our shared password. Yeah, we used to be that trusting. I felt like a wall was slowly building up between us, but I kept hoping I was wrong. One night I woke up at 3 a.m. and found her missing from the bed. I found her in the living room, quickly shutting her laptop as I walked in. "Just couldn't sleep," she said, but her voice was tight. I tried to believe her, but my gut was screaming that something was seriously off. Yeah, Brad started finding every excuse to be around Ashley whenever I wasn't there. He'd offer to keep her company while I was at work, saying he was looking for jobs online anyway. I even got him a gig at my company. I still kick myself for that, but somehow we always ended up on different shifts. I started suspecting they were deliberately trying to avoid me. The final straw was last week. I was checking our joint account to pay a couple of bills. Half our savings were gone. 23 grand vanished in a series of transfers to some other account. Over the past 2 months, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. When I confronted Ashley, she just laughed in my face. "What did you expect, Jake?" she said, not even bothering to hide it anymore. "Brad and I are taking off. He's got real ambition, unlike you. You were just a stepping stone." The coldness in her voice made me realize I didn't even recognize the woman I'd married anymore. Brad swaggered in that same smug grin plastered on his face. "She was never happy with you, bro. You were too blind to see it. Thanks for the startup cash, by the way. We've got big plans." He clapped me on the shoulder like we were buddies, but his eyes glittered with contempt. I just stood there watching my wife of 8 years grab a couple of packed bags. Guess those recent shopping sprees of hers made sense now. She yanked off her wedding ring, the one we'd picked out together at the Scottsdale Fashion Square, and tossed it into the kitchen trash can. "You were nothing but a placeholder," she said, and walked out without a backward glance. They were expecting me to lose it, to yell, maybe try to take a swing at Brad, but I just stood there, strangely calm, and watched them leave. Brad looked almost disappointed that I didn't react. I remember telling myself I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. What they didn't know was that I'd known for weeks, and I'd been planning. Those late nights I was working were actually spent gathering evidence. Those evenings I was out with friends were spent putting things in motion. They thought they were so clever, but they had no idea what was coming. I swore to myself they were going to pay. I wasn't going to get mad or beg. I wasn't going to get drunk or key their precious Tesla like they probably expected. No, I was going to do something way better. Something that would make them regret the day they ever decided to play me for a fool. I was going to show them my real face. This was just the beginning. They were probably out celebrating right now, thinking they'd won. Well, let them have their moment. In a few days, they were going to learn exactly who they were dealing with. I was going to make them sorry. I have a lot more to share, but it's getting late, and I have some calls to make. This isn't over. Far from it. I'll update you when the next phase begins. A week has passed since that night, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole mess. I've been getting a ton of messages and calls from friends and family. They're shocked, they're pissed on my behalf, and they want to know if I'm okay. I keep reassuring them that I'm fine, even better than fine. Because while Ashley and Brad were busy enjoying their victory, I was quietly setting the stage for my comeback. I've been working on a plan, carefully laying out each step. Today I'm going to share with you what I've been up to this past week. First, let's talk about Brad. You remember how he was flaunting his new lifestyle, the new Audi, the fancy vacations, the designer clothes. Turns out he wasn't just stealing from me, he was stealing from the company too. I uncovered evidence that he'd been embezzling tens of thousands of dollars, and Ashley, she was in on it. She knew what was happening and helped him cover his tracks. She didn't just betray me, she betrayed the company where I'd worked my ass off to build my career. My suspicions started about 6 months ago. Brad kept bragging about his deals and investments, but something didn't add up. He was living way beyond his means for a guy on a construction site manager's salary, even with the overtime he claimed. He always seemed rushed and secretive, like he was hiding something. Then I started noticing the small things Brad mentioned. A trip to Miami during a week he was supposed to be working late on a major project. Since I'm in the same industry, I knew the contract value of that project. The numbers he was throwing around didn't match up. At first, it was just little inconsistencies, but they kept piling up. I started wondering if I was just being paranoid. I kept quiet and started gathering proof. Every time Brad mentioned a project, I'd make a note. Every time he showed off a new purchase, I'd look up how much it cost. Ashley always defended him, saying I was just jealous. Brad knows how to make money, she'd say, shooting me a look. Now I knew why she was so confident. She was helping him pull it off. The real kicker was when I found a bunch of receipts in our shared cloud storage that Ashley had forgotten to delete invoices for materials that didn't exist. Expense reports with inflated figures, fake payments to shell vendors. They weren't exactly criminal masterminds, just sloppy and arrogant. I was floored by the sheer extent of their deception. I spent 3 months building a solid case. Every fraudulent transaction, every lie, every forged document. I was determined not to let them pin this on me when it all blew up. And trust me, I was going to make sure it blew up in their faces. I was going to make them pay for what they did. Last week, after they cleaned out our joint account, I made an anonymous call to Brad's company's ethics hotline. Then I sent an email with just enough evidence to trigger an internal audit. I knew exactly which projects to point them to. I wanted them to know that I wasn't someone they could just walk all over. The results were satisfying. Brad got called into a meeting first thing Monday morning. By noon, he was escorted out of the building. No fanfare, just a cardboard box with his personal belongings. The look on his face priceless. He knew exactly who was behind it, but he couldn't prove a thing. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Ashley called me screaming bloody murder. "How could you do this to your own brother, Jake?" she screeched. I just laughed and hung up. The same laugh Brad had given me when he talked about their affair. It felt good knowing they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. Their little perfect world was starting to crumble. Brad's reputation in the industry was toast. Those investment wins they'd been bragging about. Gone the new house they'd put a deposit on. They were scrambling to back out of the deal. I knew they were desperate. The best part was that people were starting to see them for who they really were. Our mutual friends kept calling, telling me about the red flags they'd noticed, but never said anything about it. Even Brad's closest buddies were distancing themselves. No one wanted to be associated with a company thief and a brother betrayer. Their isolation was growing, but I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning, just the ma. Brad and Ashley thought they were so smart, building a new life on stolen money and betrayal. They forgot one crucial thing: to always play the long game. I wasn't going to let them get away with what they did. For those of you asking about legal action, don't worry. Everything I've done is completely above board. I just made sure the right people knew where to look. The company's internal investigation will take care of the rest. I believe in justice. There will be more updates to come. The dominoes are still falling, and I'm just getting started. I can't wait to see what happens next. Things are getting crazier by the day. If I told you what's happened in the past week, you wouldn't believe me. But it's all true, and I'm here to spill every single detail. I can't believe my life has taken this turn. Let's start with last Thursday. I was enjoying my morning coffee, getting ready for a normal day at work, when my phone started blowing up. Text messages, voicemails, emails. From different people. I had a bad feeling in my gut. Turns out Brad and Ashley had a massive blowout right on their front lawn. My good Samaritan neighbor Tanya, who's been keeping me in the loop, sent me a video. I was shocked when I watched it. Brad, still in his pajamas, was yelling about how they were broke and blaming Ashley for promising him a fairy tale life. Ashley, equally loud, was throwing his clothes onto the lawn, screaming that he'd ruined everything and she'd given up a good life for him. They sounded like a couple in a bad reality TV show. The best part was that all the neighbors were out watching. A few were even recording. Brad and Ashley were so caught up in their shouting match, they didn't even notice the growing audience. They were airing their dirty laundry for the whole neighborhood to hear. I almost felt sorry for them, but then I remembered what they did to me. Tanya told me that Ashley was screaming at Brad about how he'd promised her a life of luxury, but now they couldn't even afford to pay the rent on their crappy apartment. You remember how they drained our joint account and Brett took out those loans against our family business? Credit line? Well, turns out living the high life on stolen money only works when you have a steady income to back it up. No job, no income, those loan payments were crushing them. I knew they were feeling the heat from their actions. They tried to hit up my family for cash, but that door was slammed shut in their faces. I'd already shown everyone the proof of what they'd done, and no one wanted to be associated with them. My cousin sent me a recording of Brad's call to my mom begging her for help. My mom's response was epic. "You made your bed with your brother's wife, now lie in it." Click. My mom always had a way with words. I was so proud of her. Last weekend was our annual family barbecue. Guess who wasn't invited? While I was enjoying my mom's famous potato salad, Brad and Ashley were probably eating ramen noodles in their dingy apartment. Aunt Martha, who always had a soft spot for Brad, came up to me and hugged me, saying she was so sorry she hadn't seen his true colors sooner. The family support has been overwhelming. Turns out blood isn't always thicker than water, especially when you betray your own brother. I felt more loved by my family than ever. Ashley tried to contact me on Instagram last week. "Jake, can we please talk? I've made a huge mistake." She messaged, I just left her on read. I didn't want to hear anything she had to say. Then she started posting all these cryptic, sad quotes about regret and second chances on her page. Brad must have seen them because he went on Facebook and ranted about how she was a ungrateful bitch. And just like her ex-boyfriends, meaning me, such a gentleman. I just shook my head at their hypocrisy. And here's the kicker, they had to sell their new car, the one they bought with my money. I drove past them yesterday in my new Ford F-150 bought with the bonus from my recent promotion. Turns out focusing on work instead of revenge does pay off. They were arguing outside a seedy pawn shop. Brad looked like he hadn't shaved in days, and Ashley, well, let's just say the designer wardrobe she blew my money on wasn't looking so fresh anymore. I felt a pang of satisfaction seeing them face reality. Their relationship is falling apart faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. Tanya tells me they're fighting every night. Apparently, Ashley found out Brad was texting his ex on WhatsApp, probably looking for his next upgrade. It's almost comical if it wasn't so pathetic. I wonder if they even realize how badly they've messed up. I heard Ashley's been asking around about job openings. Turns out her Instagram influencer dreams weren't paying the bills. Go figure, Brad's been drinking more. My cousin spotted him at a local bar drowning his sorrows and telling anyone who'd listen about how unfair life is. I get the feeling they are destroying each other. This is the best revenge. I haven't had to do anything except let them destroy themselves. Well, maybe I helped karma along a bit by making sure everyone knew the truth, but they've done most of the heavy lifting themselves. I simply gave them enough rope to hang themselves. Tomorrow's their meeting with the bank about their overdue loans. I know because Brad drunk texted me at 2 a.m., alternating between threatening me and begging me for help. I didn't reply. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. I learned that the hard way. I'll update you soon. My gut tells me this twisted game isn't over yet. I have a feeling the worst is yet to come. I'll never forget the night everything came to a head. It was a Tuesday, an otherwise ordinary night. I was at home working on my computer when my phone rang. It was Tanya, my neighbor, who always kept me updated on Brad and Ashley. But this time her voice wasn't filled with amusement. She sounded worried. I could sense the urgency in her voice. "Jake, you need to get it over here right away," she said. "Something big has happened." I didn't hesitate for a second. Every cell in my body was screaming that something terrible had happened. I gritted my teeth, grabbed my keys, and sped off, weaving through traffic like a maniac. When I arrived, the flashing lights of police cars and the wailing of sirens filled the night, and I was met with a scene of utter chaos. I felt like I was stepping into a nightmare. Cops were everywhere, ambulances were pulling up, and a crowd of neighbors stood outside whispering in shock. I pushed my way through the crowd and found Tanya standing near the front. She was pale and trembling. "What is it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What happened?" I needed to know the truth. "They were fighting," Tanya said, her voice shaking. "Really bad. I heard shouting, things breaking, then a gunshot." She could barely get the words out. I froze. "A gunshot?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tanya nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Brad, he had a gun. I don't know where he got it. They were arguing, and then Then he shot Ashley. She choked back a sob, trying to regain her composure. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Brad shot Ashley. What the hell was he thinking? Why would he do that? Is she okay? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I prayed there was still hope. Tanya shook her head. She's gone. Dead Brad, too. He turned the gun on himself afterward. She looked at me with wide, horrified eyes. I stood there numb. I didn't know what to feel. Grief, shock, relief, maybe a twisted sense of satisfaction. They destroyed each other just like I predicted. But like this was brutal. I felt like I was in some alternate reality. The police cordoned off the crime scene and started interviewing witnesses. I spoke to a detective, telling him about Brad and Ashley's toxic relationship, their betrayal and lies, how they'd stolen from me and tried to build a new life on my pain. I laid out everything I'd done to expose them. The detective listened intently, taking careful notes. He said they had found the gun in Brad's hand, and it looked like a clear case of murder-suicide. He asked if I wanted to press charges against Brad for the theft, but I said no. They were both dead. What was the point? I just wanted this whole thing to be over. I left the scene with an overwhelming sense of emptiness. It was over. My revenge was complete, but it hadn't brought me the satisfaction I'd expected. Instead, I felt a profound sadness. I'd lost my brother, my ex-wife, and a part of myself. I knew I would never forget that night. A few days later, I attended Brad and Ashley's funeral. It was a somber, depressing affair. My parents, who had always defended Brad and dismissed my concerns, were now completely broken. They'd lost both their children in one night. I felt a pang of pity for them, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive them. I stared at Brad and Ashley's caskets, and I couldn't help but wonder, did it have to end this way? If they hadn't betrayed me, if they hadn't been so greedy and deceitful, would they still be alive? Could we have salvaged our shattered family? I would never know. I never got the answers to those questions. Brad and Ashley took their secrets to the grave, and I was left with nothing but regret and a million what-ifs. I would carry those questions with me for the rest of my life. Life went on somehow. I threw myself into my work, my friends, and my new relationship. I tried to move on from the past, but I knew it would always haunt me. I'd learned a harsh lesson about betrayal and its consequences. I'd learned that revenge wasn't the answer, and sometimes the best thing to do was to let go and move forward. I was learning to forgive and forget, but it was a long process, and that's all I have to share. My story may not have a happy ending, but it's a true one. A story about love loss, betrayal, and ultimately forgiveness. I hope it makes you realize that life is too short to waste on hatred and revenge. Cherish the people you love, and never let greed and deceit ruin your life. Learn to forgive and to move on, and that's the end of my tragic story. I know it's a lot to take in and maybe not what you expected, but I hope it gave you something to think about. I hope you can learn from my mistakes. If you found this video meaningful, please share it with your loved ones. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories. And if you have any thoughts, please share them in the comments below. I always appreciate hearing from you. Thank you for listening, and remember, life's too short to waste on hate. Love, forgive, and move on. Treasure what you have before it's too late. This is my story. I'll see you in the next one.